Okay, our speaker tonight is George McDonald. His father lived in Archville years ago, and he was good friends of our family. And he was in Pearl Harbor when they attacked, and he was the first one to see the Japanese on the radar. He told his superiors, and they said, "No, don't worry about it." And the rest is history. But with that, George, take it away.
So, I'm honored to be here. My father probably wouldn't believe this, that I'm here tonight. But his story needed to be told, and for the last 25 years I've told it. And I'm going to share his experience in Pearl Harbor, and I'm also going to give you a little bit of information in regards to my father's time here. Okay, so my family originally started in the Carbondale area. There were a number of the McDonalds that were there. That was prior to my grandfather coming over here. My grandfather came over in the 1880s. He was in New York initially, and then he came and became a coal miner. Sometime in the 1890s, he settled in Archibald, and in 1916, he married, and he was living on Salem Road. And they eventually moved to Cemetery Street, and in fact, today they rest on the other side of Cemetery Street. My dad was born in 1919. He lived on Cemetery Street. He joined the Army in 1940. His brother Frank was 2 years older, who later became the detective commander of NYPD Fort Apache, the Bronx. My grandfather was a coal miner and actively involved in the United Mine Workers Union. Growing up here, my father told stories of his many friends: Munley, McNulty, Cummings, Merrick. I asked my uncle about the name that I thought was unusual, Bunny McNulty, who actually bought our house on Cemetery Street when they moved in 1943, when my grandmother passed away. He said he got the name Bunny because he had 12 kids. I guess that's an Archibald thing, you know. My father graduated from high school, spent another year studying at St. Thomas. They had courses in typing and things of that nature. Entered the Army in September 1940 and never saw his mother again. They were stationed in New York until they boarded a ship traveling through the Panama Canal and eventually landed in Hawaii in December of 1940. By the spring of 1941, they were setting up the radar, which were top secret program to detect incoming planes in the event of war. After the radars were set up, he was assigned to communications at Fort Shafter, where the readings from the radars were communicated. So that's kind of a quick overview, you know, from here. So on December 6, 1941, all was quiet in the Hawaiian Islands. Most knew that war was imminent. The expectation was that it might break out in the Far East. Warnings were evident for months before the attack of Pearl Harbor. Most knew war was about to break out with Japan. A war warning was sent on November 28, 1941 to the commanders in Hawaii. General Short interpreted this to be an alert for sabotage. This was the Honolulu newspaper, November 30th, 1941. Many expected the war would break out in the Far East. The information center at Fort Shafter, where my father was, started a betting pool as to when Pearl Harbor would be attacked. There are a few warnings if anyone has seen any of the movies about Pearl Harbor. There were actually 3 warnings. One was there was a midget sub that was sunk by the crew of the ward, and that was at 6:45 a.m. And the last warning was the Opana radar warning, which my father was involved with. This took place about 7:10, about 45, 50 minutes prior to the attack. There was also a warning from Washington that was sent to General Short. He received it at 2:58 p.m., 5 hours after the attack began. This is the crew of the USS Ward. They found a sub a couple of years ago at the entrance to the harbor at Pearl Harbor. At about 6:45, the Ward fired on oncoming tower of a mini submarine entering Pearl Harbor. The message was sent to the Navy by the Ward skipper Outerbridge at 6:53 a.m. We have attacked, fired upon, and dropped depth charges on the submarine in the defensive sea area. At 7:30, the head admiral, Admiral Kimmel, was advised of the Ward's actions. He thought it might be a false report. He wanted to wait for verification. 20 minutes later, the Japanese gave him clear verification. This is the Opana radar. It's called an SCR 27DB. It was located at Kahuku Point, which was on the very tip of the island of Oahu. This was the actual radar. According to Joe Lockhart, who was the radar operator on December 7th, they were 500 feet in elevation. It was the most optimal height for the radar. General Short ordered the radar to be operational from 4 to 7 a.m. because he thought that would be the most likely time an attack would take place. So up at Opana Point, where the radar is, Private Elliott and Lockhart were running the radar at Opana Point. The plotters shut down their exercise at Shafter Information Center about 7 a.m. And I'll explain to you the plotting and that in a minute here. Elliott reminded Lockhart that he wanted to learn how to use the oscilloscope, which they can see the planes or whatever's in the air. Lockhart had started to shut down the radar system down. Private George Elliott. Elliott was recently transferred from Hickam Field to work at the radar in Opana in late November, so he was relatively new to this. Opana was on the northern tip of Oahu, as I had mentioned before. Private Lockhart, and there's actually a picture of Joe with my father, if you see that later. Joe arrived in Hawaii in December 1940 along with my father. They were good friends. He was experienced in the radar. Lockhart and my father helped to set up the radars that were delivered in Hawaii in July of 1941. Radar at that time was considered as very, very top secret. Prior to his assignment in Opana, he was the operator at another radar called Cocoa Head, which was just another location that they had on the island of Oahu. My father was good friends with Joe. This picture was taken as the radar was top secret and they could not take a picture in front of the radar of Joe. This was the actual machine that Lockhart and Elliott used to track the oncoming flight. The console showed the targets on a small screen. The targets could be planes, ships, looked like points on an EKG machine. According to a visit with Joe Lockhart that I had, Joe could tell what the target was according to the speed. Ships were slow, planes were fast, and land didn't move. The radar was ordered to be operational, as I mentioned, between 4 and 7 by General Short. There were 5 radars. Although the radar operation was running for instructional purposes, Short later testified that was most likely the time of an attack would take place, if it were to take place. Opana was instructed to shut down at 6:54 on December 7th, according to George Elliott. So Opana was shutting down, and Elliott reminded Lockhart that they had approved for radar instruction. Lockhart turned the unit back on. It took a few minutes for the tubes to warm up again. Now, these accounts that I'm giving you are accounts that were given me by those people that were at the radar. So I'm sharing their account, maybe not the account in a history book. So at the information center, that's where my dad was. The Japanese first wave of planes took off from the carriers about 20 minutes later than their plan. By 7 a.m., they were just entering an area where they could be viewed by radar. All the radar units were down at this time when they first came in. These are the actual radar units where the diamonds are here. There's in the very top here, that's where Opana is, and that was the one, it was the only one that was open at the time when the Japanese were coming in. There are Army airfields. Let's see. There's Pearl Harbor here. There's Hickam Base. There's other bases here. Wheeler is where the pursuit planes were. And my father was somewhere in that area, just above the harbor. The actual aircraft warning information center was built on a dump. It housed communication network to track, detect, and identify targets within 150 miles of Oahu. This is where my father and Lieutenant Tyler were located, in that building. Prior to December 7th, the radars were in operation most of the day. Lieutenant White was given permission, and he was my father's lieutenant, that they were going to run from 4 to 7 on Sunday, December 7th, so that they could take a rest from being on a warning. My father, me and the communication switchboard from 5 p.m. on December 6th and until the morning of the 7th. There was a Lieutenant Tyler. He was assigned to the center from 4 to 8. He was the duty officer, but he was actually a pilot, and he really was familiarizing himself with the operation, but he was in charge. He was observing the operation of the plotting, the targets that picked up by the radar units around the island. Tyler was a pursuit pilot from Wheeler Field, where the pursuit pilots were. There were 5 plotters and 1 historical plotter that kind of kept track of everything. And this is what the plotting table looked like. So when the radar would get a reading, they would put it on the board there, and they could see what was going on. Now, obviously, at the time that this took place, there would have been 100 of those showing, but They were gone. They were off. So the plotters were connected with, directly with the radars that were on the different parts of the island. They designate targets picked up by the radar. Officers would view the activity and identify the targets. If the target could not be identified, then the pursuit planes were supposed to be scrambled to identify or shoot down. This is the actual plotting table at information center where my dad was. So you can see the plotters and with their sticks, and they kind of keep track of where things are. I got this from the National Archives. The plotting grid showed where the readings were picked up by the various radar sites. They would move the plots by the radar operators as they called them in. Although a number of the plots were showing up on the board, it was not an unusual number of targets according to Sergeant Stanley Wickus. Sergeant Ireland was concerned though because they were starting to pick up things prior to the attack, but they were going off at 7 o'clock. Tyler thought they might be US bombers that morning, and Tyler later testified that he was not posted in regards to the story that everybody tells, that the B-17s were coming in, that he knew that. He didn't. At 7 a.m., the center was quiet. All the plotters left for breakfast. There were only 2 people in there. It was Tyler and McDonald, my father. Tyler was the lieutenant. Initially, my father didn't even know that Tyler was there. Tyler was detailed until 8 a.m. My father was waiting for his replacement for breakfast, and that's a picture of my dad day after. Back up to the radar. When the radar came back online, Elliot, the inexperienced person, was in front of the oscilloscope, and Lockhart, who was very familiar with this, saw the screen was full of targets. Lockhart took the controls and thought the radar was malfunctioning because there was so much going on. And this is kind of where Kahuku Point is today. If you see this area here with this white up on top of the hill, that's a relay station for the government today. And that's what looks up close. This is what the image would look like. Now, for me to look at that and say there are planes coming in, I have no idea, but Joe Lockhart knew. This is his actual depiction of it that he gave me, that showed what he was showing on there. And you could see that, especially the ones that were so high, was showing that an incredible amount of planes were coming in. So Lockhart knows that the radars picked up the largest number of planes. Elliot tries to call into the information center, but the plotters are gone. Elliot tries to call plotters. Lockhart suggests that he call the administrative line where my father was. Elliot gets patched through on Quillet base camp and is patched through to the information center. This is the lieutenant who was with my dad, Kermit Tyler. And his direct officer was Major Berquist. And he basically said that Tyler was assigned to observe the function of the top secret information center. And if anything unusual take place, he was to call Berquist. He didn't think anything unusual was taking place. The planes were 132 miles out, coming in from the north, 3 points east. Elliot can hardly be heard by my father as the call was patched through the base. Elliot is excited and claims there's a large number of planes coming in from the north, 132 miles out, 3 points east. Private McDonald tells Elliot that he will pass the information on and call back. McDonald, thinking he's the only one in the center, writes the message down and goes to time it from the clock in the plotting room. When McDonald goes to time the message, he sees Tyler. He's sitting at the plotting board. McDonald tells Tyler the report, a large number of planes coming in from the north, 3 points east. Tyler tells him that it's nothing. This is similar to the switchboard my dad had. He had a direct connection to Bellows, Hickam, and he could contact anybody in Hawaii. My father returns the call to the Oceana radar. He gets Private Lockhart on the line. McDonald and Lockhart, they're friends. They're good friends. McDonald thinks that the first call was Lockhart also. Lockhart is excited and states there's a large number of planes coming in from the north. McDonald advises Lockhart that the duty officer said it's nothing. Lockhart's excited. He's never seen so many planes. Hey, Mac, there's a heck of a big flight of planes coming in. The whole scope is covered, Lockhart told my father. Lockhart convinces McDonald that it's something highly unusual. It's the largest flight he's ever seen. McDonald is infected with his friend's excitement. McDonald returns to the plotting room and again reports to Tyler, "Sir, this is the first call I've received like this. It seems serious." Knowing that Tyler was new to the center, McDonald suggests a course of action to respond to the unusual radar report. Recall the plotters to track the flight and alert Wheeler, where the fighter planes were located. This is an actual track of that George Elliott was doing of the Japanese coming in. And down below here, that's Hawaii, right there. You can see them from the top where it says Clara here. Tyler again says that it's nothing. When Tyler will not do anything, McDonald patches him through to Lockhart to get the details firsthand. The call's logged at this time, which is about 7:20. McDonald explains to Tyler that the flight has filled the radar screen. He's never seen so many planes. In later testimony, Lockhart claimed that he pressed the lieutenant as much as an enlisted man could with an officer. His answer? Well, don't worry about it, it's nothing. If you look online, well, don't worry about it, it's nothing, you'll see Tyler's name. The words haunted Tyler for his entire life. Okay, so Lockhart continued to talk with my father after talking to Tyler. It's clear to him the lieutenant just doesn't understand something big's taking place. Elliott and Lockhart tracked the flight until 7:39 when ground interference disrupts the track. They were relieved for the replacements and they were returning to base for breakfast. A few minutes later, the Japanese planes were flying above Kahuku Point where they were. McDonald tries for the third time to get Tyler to respond to the report. He knew that Tyler was inexperienced, and intuitively my father knew that it was very important. He considered going over Tyler's head to report it himself. However, who's going to listen to a private anyway? There was a betting pool, the information center, as to what day the Japanese would attack. McDonald was relieved at 7:40. On my father's return to the tent, he thought about the unusual sighting, unwillingness of the lieutenant to respond to it. He hoped that it was nothing, yet gnawed at him. Not knowing what the sighting was, he woke up his tent mate saying, "Shem, the Japs are coming," prior to the attack. Someone in the betting pool at the information center would win the bet if they picked December 7th. A few moments later, the Japanese plane filled the skies. Private McDonald and Private Schimmel went to the top of a mess hall to witness the massacre. That's Wheeler Field, where the pursuit planes were. To this day, there's cement areas that they've patched in. You can see where the bombs were when I saw this about 20 years ago. This is where all the ships were. Most of the important ships were right in this area here. They were most of them were just sunk. Oklahoma flipped over. There's Ford Island over here. The first wave attacked Hickam Field near Pearl Harbor, right there. And the ships in the harbor about 7:55 included 183 aircraft, 40 torpedo planes, 49 level bombers, 51 dive bombers, and 43 fighters. The second wave started about an hour later with another 170 planes. That's what Wheeler Field looked like. Torpedo planes came so low they could actually see the pilots. 21 ships were lost or damaged. That was the USS Shaw. USS Arizona lost 1,177 men when it blew up. It was hit by a 1,786-pound armor-piercing bomb that hit the ship's forward ammunition magazine, exploded, and sank to the bottom of the harbor. Many of the sailors were still in their bunks. West Virginia. Rescue effort was heroic. 105 sailors lost in the West Virginia. There was a seaman, second class, Walter Pasiga, was killed, and he lived about 5 miles away from here. Oklahoma, 429 died, and it rolled over. They had to use torches to cut the hull to try to rescue trapped sailors. Only 32 were rescued. 429 dead. Mini sub washed up, and they were actually the first prisoner of war were Japanese. Hickam Field. The planes were wingtip to wingtip, so they hit one and they could get a whole bunch of them. Hickam Barracks, to this day, they still have marks in the walls where where the Japanese came in and machine gunned. The Pacific Fleet was in ruins. Fortunately, the prize target, which were the aircraft carriers, were out to sea at the time of the attack. And that's really what the Japanese wanted to get, but they weren't there, thank God. So, finally, Tyler called back the plotters. McDonald and Schimmel ran in to help at the information center. Tyler was told that the attack was taken by, not by him calling Wheeler Field, but Wheeler Field called him and told him that they were under attack. Some of the pursuit planes were airborne. There were actually planes that were able to get airborne. Berquist, who was Tyler's commanding officer, arrived about 10 a.m. with his car full of bullet holes from the Japanese planes. Chaos filled the information center where my father was. According to General Short, if the warning was listened to, it could have given enough time to disperse the planes. 45-minute warning, some people believe wasn't going to make that much difference. Other people believe that it could have made a difference, and a number of the historians tend to think that it could have, according to there's one Professor Don Goldstein. He was probably one of the most noted Pearl Harbor books, claimed if the warning was heeded, at least they would have been ready and would have been harder for the torpedo bombers who did all the damage to fly in the anti-aircraft fire. Hence, damage may have been less, and we would have shot down more planes, but above all, the 18-year-olds, my father and the other ones that were so young, at least they would have a chance to fight back. And that was in an email that he gave to me about 20 years ago, before he passed. Tetley was the commanding officer of the aircraft warning. And his impression was that the key to the attack was the total surprise. These are some of the people. This man was in Connecticut, a few towns from me, and in West Hartford, and he was one of the pilots that went into the air. When he got into the plane, he gave his who was helping him get in the plane, he gave him the watch and said, "Give it to my mother." He's still missing in action. Richard Finn was a tough son of a gun. He stood in an airfield with a machine gun, and he was shooting down Japanese planes, and he continued to shoot even though he was hit many times, and he was a Medal of Honor recipient. The attack brought our nation together and brought us into World War II. It took us out of our isolationist stance. Many men enlisted in the service to avenge the massacre at Pearl Harbor. So, some of the people that I've been talking about, Joe Lockhart, who was up at the radar, he was promoted to lieutenant and proclaimed the first hero of World War II. He was given the Distinguished Service Medal at the Capitol in Washington for his actions. I got to know Joe. I visited with him many times before he passed, and very interesting person. In 2011, that's a picture of Joe that I took when I visited with him. George Elliott. George was initially not even recognized as being at Pearl Harbor, at the radar, and at his insistence, they finally gave him a medal. In 1946, he was given a Legion of Merit. He refused to accept any medal less than what his cohort Joe Lockhart got. He never accepted it. He asked me to ask his son to get it for him after he passed. That's George, 2001. Richard Schimmel, 100 years old, a few years ago. I visited with him. Remember when I said, Shim, the Japs are coming? That's Shim. My dad, he is told by the officers to keep his mouth shut regarding what happened in the Information Center. In 1944, when an Army inquiry took place, he was given furlough for the first time in 4 years. When he was on leave, he was staying with B. Cummings. And the general sent a plane to pick him up so that he could testify in Washington at the Pearl Harbor Army Board. In 2005, he was awarded Army Commendation Medal for his efforts to try to guide Tyler with the Opana warning. This was a note from Tetley, who was the commanding officer, in regards to my dad, and basically showed me that what my dad tried to do was very important. My dad went back to Pearl Harbor in 1961. That's a picture of my dad on the USS Arizona. And that's a picture of the medal with the top general in Connecticut and Senator Chris Dodd at the time. And every politician within 100 miles showed up for this. Kermit Tyler, the lieutenant. By 1944, he was promoted to lieutenant colonel. Played a major role in NORAD, early warning system. Tyler retired in 1961 from the Air Force. He had died probably 10, 15 years ago. That's a picture of him and me in 2001 when we in Pearl Harbor. I think that was the last time he was there. In 2006, we were on a National Park Service asked me to speak in regards to my father's account, and that's me, and that's Lieutenant Tyler. Now, Berquist, who was Tyler's commanding officer, became about number 2 in the Air Force. And he, in my opinion, protected Kermit Tyler over the years. And I think they should. I think that he made a mistake one day. This is a picture of Joe Lockhart, Kermit Tyler, George Elliott, those 3 people that I was talking about, in Hawaii. That's a plaque that's up on the hill, that I said was a relay station for the U.S. There's a message board at the Turtle Bay Resort, which is at the bottom of the mountain where the radar was. It's a historic landmark. So many years later, those who can't remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And we all remember that. And there was a copy that I had put together for your library here. I tried to confirm if they still had it at the Valley Library and in the Murley Room. And I presented that when the Murley Room was first created. And I gave them a second copy of it. And if need be, let me know. I'll make another copy for them if they don't have something there. That will share my father's handwritten account, his testimony before the Pearl Harbor Army Board, and a lot of other material that, you know, basically kind of tells the story that I told you here tonight. I wrote a few other things here specifically that I thought were appropriate. So my father was at the first battle of World War II for the Americans. He was in the last battle of World War II. So he was in Pearl Harbor, and he was, the last place he was is in Okinawa. That was our last one. As I mentioned, when my father was on leave, he was with B. Cummings when the generals tried to get him. In 1945, he was brought back from the Pacific. He contracted hepatitis in Okinawa. He spent the next 6 months in an army hospital in Massachusetts. He was visited by General Eisenhower when he was hospitalized. I asked my dad how long he was in the war. My father replied, "Day one, Pearl Harbor." I said, "You got me beat." My father went AWOL from the hospital only once. He went to see his brother and his father in New York, arriving Christmas of 1945. He had not been with his family since 1939. He was stationed at many islands: Canton, Colagen, Macon, New Guinea, Saipan, Okinawa. He returned here to attend Johnson School in Scranton to study to become a machinist. He later took this skill to create prototypes of jet engines for Pratt & Whitney aircraft. And in the summer of 1949, he moved to New York to live with his elderly father. There's also a plaque at the courthouse and it has a listing of all the people that were in Lackawanna County who were at Pearl Harbor. And initially it had maybe about 50 names in it. Well over 100 names, maybe 150 names there now. If you're ever out that way, it's, I went to the dedication, it was very moving. Any questions?
Yeah, I was kind of curious, like, if I understand correctly, even though they're on alert, the radar was only operational from 4 a.m. to 7? Is that because of the equipment, like, possibilities? What was possibly the reason it was only on 3 hours?
The day before they were going the whole time.
Wow.
But they thought that they would give them a break.
What about that little submarine? What was the purpose of that? Were they going to try to bomb something? Or?
There were a number of submarines that were going into Pearl Harbor. They were trying to go in with the boats, with the ships, and they had torpedoes. So they were trying to attack with the midget subs also.
Never knew that.
Any other questions? Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Glad I was able to share it with where my dad came from.
For keeping the story alive on behalf of your dad and those three other men.
Yes,
Good job.
yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
the story got out.
Very good.
Yeah,
Our heroes, thank
yeah, it is, it's a fascinating story.
you.
Really
It
is.
And very appropriate for the timing, too.
Timing, tomorrow is Veterans Day. Yep.
I heard that.
And his father knew my family very well, my mom's family did. My uncle used to go fishing with him, and his father had a trick there. Instead of having my uncle bang on the door and wake everybody up, he tied thread around his big toe, throw it out the window. My uncle walked by, pull on the thread, and wake him up, and they go fishing.